A new chapter of American greatness is now beginning. A new national pride is sweeping across our nation, and a new surge of optimism is placing impossible dreams firmly within our grasp. What we are witnessing
President Trump delivers a message of unity and hope in his first address to a joint session of Congress. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our extended coverage of the president's speech here on KTVU Fox 2 News. I'm Julie Hayner.
And I'm Frank Somerville. In tonight's hour-long address, President Trump touched on a number of different issues, including race and religion. In fact, he started off by acknowledging Black History Month and recent threats against Jewish centers across the country. He also talked about immigration and the importance of securing the U.S. border, including construction of a border wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. Another topic, job creation, citing several companies he says have committed to creating tens of thousands of jobs here in the United States. And, of course, he talked about his plans to repeal and replace Obamacare, saying that it is collapsing and the promises made have been broken.
Joining us now on our set, KTVU political reporter Ross Palumbo and political analyst Brian Sobel. Let's begin with you, Brian, the most unconventional president of our lifetimes. How did he do tonight?
He gave a pretty conventional speech, to be honest with you. There were concerns that he might go off script and riff and do what we're used to him doing. And tonight, by and large, with the exception of only a couple of times, he stuck with what was written, and he delivered it well. He did have opportunity. There were some jeers. There were certain times where he could have, and in the past we've seen a Donald Trump go off and make ad-lib remarks, but he really did stay on point. No, he stayed on point, and I think we saw a different Donald Trump tonight, to be honest with you. He for the first time, I think, for a lot of people, he looked presidential.
I have to say, I thought this was the best speech that I have seen President Trump deliver. Ross, what do you think?
Well, I think that his speechwriters have reason to celebrate tonight. Donald Trump stuck to the script, and a far cry from the American carnage speech that we saw during the inauguration, which is really the first time we saw him attempt to act presidential. This one was very uplifting. He spoke of unity. He spoke of Republicans and Democrats coming together. Everything was going up towards the future. We've never seen Donald Trump speak like this, and I think the performance was excellent.
Yeah, because during the convention speech, some people criticized it as being dark.
It was dark and gloomy. I was in the room at the time, and I'll tell you that everyone felt it. Everyone felt it. Even Trump supporters, I think, walked away from that a little disappointed, thinking that they needed something a little more uplifting, in sharp contrast to what we saw at the Democratic National Convention, where everything was going forward. But tonight, Donald Trump killed it. He did. He really came out. He appeared presidential. He was out there to unify. The biggest criticism of his presidency so far is after coming off of this election where he won the electoral vote, where he didn't get the popular vote by some 3 million, everyone expected him at the inauguration to come out and unify. That didn't happen. Now, 40 days later, tonight was the night that we saw that happen.
And he covered a broad range of topics, from improving the economy to replacing and repealing Obamacare to job growth. What do you think he really hit out of the park tonight in terms of all of these many issues that he was campaigning on and that he laid out for his legislative agenda tonight? Well, I don't know that he hit anything out of the park, but these things tend to have a lot of platitudes. This first address, typically later on it'll be called the State of the Union. It's presumed that the new president, doesn't really have the State of the Union under control yet, and so this is the first address to a joint session. And I think he hit many of the themes that he talked about in his campaign, but he softened it, and his tone and tenor was completely different from what we've seen, and for that reason, I give the speech very high marks.
Brian, I thought it was remarkable when he came out and his opening statement said, "Tonight, as we mark the conclusion of our celebration of Black History Month, we are reminded of our nation's path towards civil rights and the work that still remains."
Yeah, I think what he was attempting to do was reach across the aisle and reached, and I said before the speech, and it came to pass, he was also going over the heads of Congress and talking to the American people, and I think he wants a lot of Americans to know where he stands.
You know, how symbolic that the president started tonight really speaking about discrimination, because throughout the entire campaign there were these cries of racism, first with Mexican Americans, and then it just escalated from there. So what a brilliant move for the president to come out and address that first off. In fact, we have a clip of what he had to say about discrimination. Take a listen.
Recent threats targeting Jewish community centers and vandalism of Jewish cemeteries, as well as last week's shooting in Kansas City, remind us that while we may be a nation divided on policies, we are a country that stands united in condemning hate and evil in all of its very ugly forms.
You know, such a powerful statement right there. That's what everyone has been expecting the president to say. We have that string of anti-Semitic attacks, vandalism at Jewish cemeteries across the entire country. I think 14 different states have been affected by all of this. The president received a lot of criticism when he put out that statement on the Holocaust and didn't even mention the word Jew. Remember that? And tonight, I think in the eyes of many, he redeemed himself by coming out to the podium and addressing that sharp criticism head on.
He really did. He reached out. He talked about working together, coming together as one.
Yeah, it was a different Donald Trump. I've never heard him be so unifying, and this is exactly what the country needs right now.
Well, Republicans seem to like what he had to say tonight. I'm just curious, do you think he won over any Democrats tonight by what he said?
Well, you know, I do think he did, because he spoke mainly of coming together with Democrats and Republicans, that Democrats and Republicans need to work together to solve this, you know, decades-long problem of immigration, that Democrats and Republicans need to come together and work on fixing Obamacare. I don't think I've ever heard Donald Trump say that before so often. He used the word unity several times tonight. He mentioned both parties several times tonight, and you could see him reaching out his hand to the Democratic Party and asking for help.
I want to ask that same question to Brian. We know Republicans liked what he had to say, but Democrats, watching their response, a lot of them much more.
Oh, yeah, I think many of them just kind of sat the speech out while sitting in the chambers.
But do you think that he made some ground with some?
We will see. I mean, again, when you talk at 30,000 feet, the devil's in the details, and I think they were being polite and gave him his due. It was very civil, except for a couple of moments where there was some booing or jeering. But we will see whether Democrats respond to this speech. I think basically they'll appreciate that he did try to reach out to them.
I thought what he said at the end, he said, we can only get there together. We are one people with one destiny. We all bleed the same blood. We all salute the same flag, and we are all made by the same God.
And oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, it was a great close, and I think it capped, a good speech. And he was also he took on Islamic terrorism head on.
And he said that was the
actually
first
said
time.
Radical Islamic
terrorism.
First time uttered in those chambers.
Right. They have not. You do not hear those words out of a president, and particularly out of President Barack Obama, who chose not to use those words. He didn't feel like those should be said because it was very broad. You heard that tonight for the first time in those chambers.
And
that was a good move?
Paul Ryan stood up and started applauding. That's the first time we saw him stand up in the chamber. I think that they came out with a plan. We knew going in that he was going to use the term, and he used it. You know, another big focus of the speech tonight was on immigration. He once again affirmed that he was going to build the wall. He also made some news tonight by talking about this new thing called Voice. It's a new office the president announced tonight that's victims of immigrant crime engagement. That'll be there to help people that have been hurt or killed by immigrant crime. He cited a family right here in California. It was very moving. In fact, let's listen to what the president had to say on immigration tonight.
Hopefully we have that clip.
Hopefully we have that clip.
Defended the borders of other nations while leaving our own borders wide open for anyone to cross and for drugs to pour in at a now unprecedented rate. America must put its own citizens first, because only then can we truly make America great again.
You know, it's so interesting how he keeps framing this argument here. It's not really about getting rid of the immigrants as much as it is about protecting Americans who are here legally. So he's really reaching out. It's a populist message again. For those of us who are here, for those of us who are here legally, the president's trying to say, I'm doing this really for you. It's not about compassion towards people trying to come into the country. It's about safety. And he said something very similar to that.
He did, and I think he's also beginning to come to the conclusion that there has to be bipartisan support for something. And so you hear him moving from some of his campaign rhetoric to, let's see if we can put something together that we can all agree on. The American people should have been happy to hear that tonight as well.
Brian, he touched on, as Julie was mentioning, pretty much everything: immigration, budget, in particular the increase in defense spending and where those cuts are going to come from. But he didn't talk any specifics tonight. And I know in a speech like this, it's generally a broad brush speech, and he did that very well this evening. But the devil is in the details.
Right.
Do you think that some of the things that he was talking about, how difficult do you think it will be to get those things implemented in Congress?
Oh, huge. It's going to be a real tough road to hoe here. He's not only going to have to convince Democrats, he's got to convince a lot of members of his own party, or the Republican Party.
Some of whom are even to the right of him.
Absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to immigration. I mean, now he's talking about a path to citizenship for the first time.
Although he didn't mention that tonight that I heard. Did he?
Yeah, he did mention it. He mentioned
did. Okay,
it tonight, and Republicans are not all on board with this. I mean, this goes directly against what he said on the campaign trail. So does this show that the president is now willing to compromise? Here we see him reaching across the aisle and softening on the dreamers, the children that are here because their parents brought them. And now perhaps there is a new way for all these people who are here to become citizens. Exactly how he's going to do it is still a little bit of a mystery. But for the first time, he's talking about it.
Yeah, and you're right. It is going to be difficult because others will see that as amnesty and are dead set against giving people amnesty.
Well, and I think what we're hearing out of Washington, D.C. is maybe it's more nuanced than obtaining citizenship, but somehow
it's getting legal status.
It's getting legal status, paying taxes, having a pathway, perhaps, to citizenship. I mean, there are still the questions of people who have been in line, to use that phrase, for a really long time, and that's got to be sorted out.
Yeah, he said if you're going to be here, you have to be able to support yourself and be here and pay your way.
You know, it's interesting, you're right, that he did make that point, and he really did talk about the economy for most of this speech. It was really surprising how much in depth he went into that. You know, of course, he is a successful businessman, so we can expect that he will focus on that. That's what people expect him to do. So we have a sound bite really quickly with what he had to say about jobs and the economy. Let's take a listen.
Since my election, Ford, Fiat Chrysler, General Motors, Sprint, SoftBank, Lockheed, Intel, Walmart, and many others have announced that they will invest billions and billions of dollars in the United States and will create tens of thousands of new American jobs.
Democrats take issue with the president taking credit for these companies announcing.
He took a lot of credit tonight.
Hiring, because all of these things were in the works for so long, and of course he was delivered an unemployment rate below 5%.
Well, he did make it clear tonight that he has acknowledged that the circumstances were inherited. He said 94 million Americans are out of the labor force. Over 43 million people are now living in poverty, and over 43 million Americans are on food stamps. More than 1 in 5 people in their prime working years are not working, and we have the worst financial recovery in 65 years. So he's acknowledging what they have to work with and then moving forward.
That is true. I mean, this has been the argument that we've seen along the campaign trail.
I did like his line. I did like his line where he said, but to accomplish our goals at home and abroad, we must restart the engine of the American economy.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a short break. We have a lot more ahead here, but we're going to take a quick break. We'll see you again in a moment. What you're looking at here was probably the most emotional and the most touching moment of President Trump's address tonight. The woman there in the center of the screen, that is Karen Owens. She is the widow of U.S. Navy Special Operator Senior Chief William Ryan Owens. He died during a mission in Yemen. The applause and the standing ovation for his wife, Karen Owens, just went on and on and on. All you can say is it was an incredibly beautiful and touching moment. It
was just moving. You know, they go to these galleries and people in the galleries, every State of the Union and that sort of thing. But this particular moment just stood out for me, not only having watched States of the Union, but being in there myself during the State of the Union. This was quite moving.
Have you ever seen an applause go that long?
I have not. Yes, I mean, Donald Trump went off script there and said, I think maybe we set a record. He was referring to how long people stood. It had to have been deafening in there.
You know, this was such an unusual moment. It was definitely the most emotional, most beautiful moment of the entire speech. But, you know, look at the history of what had happened here. Remember, Donald Trump was criticized when he lost his life, and then he tried to shift the blame to President Obama, saying that the mission had been started by his administration and that they just gave the green light. And there was a lot of back and forth on that issue. How much was he involved? Did he do the right thing? Did he rush into it so early? So really a brilliant moment, an emotional, beautiful moment, but brilliant as well, because now he has sort of recast the whole Yemen raid in a whole new light, and this is what people will remember now.
There was also a touching moment, too, when they had several people in the gallery. One was the father of a 17-year-old boy. It was Mr. Jamil Shah. His 17-year-old son was murdered by an illegal immigrant gang member, and that was very touching. He called a couple of those people, and 2 women who lost their husbands, who were a sheriff deputy and a detective here in California.
And also when he introduced the woman who had failed 3rd grade twice, I believe it was, and now she is, I think, working on her master's degree. And again, it was just another one of those beautiful moments. And when you see her face and her smile as she stood up, and you know, those are the moments that you remember from a speech like this.
You know, the largest part of this speech actually was about Obamacare. That's where he spent the most time detailing what he wants to do with Congress. He's going to go to a legislative remedy. He's going to do repeal and replace. We're not going to see a flurry of executive orders on this one. Let's listen really quickly to what he had to say about Obamacare.
Remember, when you were told that you could keep your doctor and keep your plan, we now know that all of those promises have been totally broken. Obamacare is collapsing, and we must act decisively to protect all Americans.
You know, what was interesting, too, as he came out of that, he said, every problem in America can be fixed. Why not join forces and finally get the job done and get it done right?
He did say that. You know, he spent a lot of time saying what a mess it was, how it's collapsing, what a disaster it is. But you saw the Kentucky former governor, the 72-year-old man that brought health care to so many people in his own state, really defend Obamacare and talk about how many 22 million people across the country now have health insurance, all the good Obamacare did. So still, this is so hotly debated. The Republicans plan on introducing legislation within the week now. So they are hoping to repeal and replace much sooner than anyone had anticipated.
Some of the specifics that he did talk about tonight was expand choice, lower costs, and provide better health care. He says he wants to ensure Americans with pre-existing conditions that they have access to health care, help Americans purchase their own coverage through tax credits, give state governors flexibility with Medicaid to make sure that no one is left out, and also freedom to purchase health insurance across state lines.
Although, Brian, it's interesting because if this becomes a Republican issue and it fails, then it is on Republicans.
Oh, it's on their watch.
So they had better get it right if they are going to replace.
Absolutely. But one thing to think about is in the Democratic response by Governor Beshear of Kentucky, he talked about all the people who are going to be left out of affordable health care. But he didn't have a chance to see the president's speech, beforehand. So in the president's speech, he said, we're leaving nobody behind. He talked about dependency. He talked about pre-existing conditions. He talked about all those things. So the argument is going to be, is it replace or some modification, and are there going to be millions of people who cannot now afford health care? And the president is saying, we're going to take care of everybody, and the Democrats and their narrative is, no, a whole lot of people are going to get left out here.
Well, I think, the question you asked, I think there's no question at this point that the Republicans are going to own it, because now they're going to have to do something. The president seems to be learning as he goes. He received a lot of criticism just yesterday when he said, oh, this was much more complicated.
Exactly.
knew it was this complicated.
Yeah.
Well, everyone across the entire country knew it was that complicated. So that was really a difficult moment for him, because I don't think anyone watching that soundbite.
Do you think the reality of the office and the reality of the job is setting in?
Absolutely. And you see, he's actually softening. He's actually reaching across the aisle now. He's turning to the Congress now to help him instead of just signing executive orders. And in this repealing and replacing Obamacare, he absolutely needs the help of Congress. He needs the help of his own party, who he's even at odds with the tax credit for people to buy their own insurance. Yeah. Many Republicans are saying, no, that's tantamount to a handout. Why would we give tax money to people who didn't pay in the first place?
And Ross brings up the point that he needs across the aisle and support within his own party to make these fundamental changes
to the
Affordable Health Care Act.
Do you think the reaching out tonight, the more humbled President Trump, do you think that will be effective? Do you think that will work?
For the American people, we hope so, because if Congress can get along, some of these big problems that we have can be addressed. But the one thing I was struck by was, when the speech was being written, the idea of putting Obama's name in there, I thought, was curious. There was an opportunity to refer to the Affordable Health Care Act as being flawed and having all these problems, but he mentioned Obama's name, President Obama's name, 8 or 10 times, and I thought that was kind of curious.
Yeah, over and over again, and always criticizing the former president. That's very unusual. We don't usually see that.
I want to switch topics for 1 minute. He did touch a lot on infrastructure and said that a new program for national rebuilding. He got a lot of cheers from the audience, both sides of the aisle. He also said he wants to create a $6 trillion, or he's asking for a $1 trillion infrastructure program. He's asking Congress to approve that.
Well, we certainly need it. You just drive around the Bay Area to understand that. But, $1 trillion, it's a massive amount of money, and it has to come from someplace. And one of the things we need to hear more is the details. If you increase the military budget, where are you taking that money from?
Democrats have already said that's what they want to work with the president on, that everyone is in agreement on this. It's really, where's the money coming from? Because he wants to...
he says he wants to rev up the economy. By revving up the economy, it'll help.
Yes, but Democrats are saying this is always the promise with Donald Trump. The wall will be paid for. Oh, no, now you're going to have to pay for it, and we'll pay you back. So I want to cut taxes. Where's the money coming from? Well, we'll make it on the economy. So Democrats are a little wary of that. But, we'll see. At least he's reaching out now. This is really more about unity and coming together than we've ever seen Donald Trump before. And I think the Democrats are going to come away at least happy at that.
All right. Well,
again, it was an excellent speech tonight.
Absolutely,
I think we can all agree it was probably the best speech we've ever seen President Trump give. So thank you so much for joining us for this expanded coverage of the president's speech here on KTVU News and KTVU Plus.
And our coverage continues on air tonight on the 10 o'clock news, as well as online on Facebook, Twitter, KTVU.com, and our KTVU mobile app. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll have much more discussion because this is there's a long way to go.
Topic. Yeah, absolutely. We'll see you later, everyone. Have a good night.